I feel so lucky to be here. If you can't tell, I'm very sick. Yesterday, I spent the day in bed, today, fortunately, I made it out of bed, and I get to celebrate that. One reason why I get to celebrate that is because I had the kind of sickness that we get to talk about, that we don't actively try to hide, and that sometimes can even feel like a bit of an old friend. And this is what I want for madness. Yes, madness. It's a big, scary word. Nothing more, nothing less. Madness also loosely refers to a number of sicknesses or ailments that we don't typically talk about, that we put a lot of energy into trying to hide. And not surprisingly, these ailments and sicknesses continue to grow. And they're not disappearing. They don't get smaller, despite a lot more awareness and treatment options. In fact, by some measures, suicide is the one form of death that is rising among all categories and age groups, from 6-year-olds to 90-year-olds, with a lot of teenagers and baby boomers losing their lives to suicide as well. And this is just reported deaths by suicide. This doesn't even begin to count the numbers of people who simply waste away or let themselves die. And yes, not included in these numbers as well are the numbers of people who take a lot of others out with them on their way down. So this is all to say that madness or mental illness or whatever you want to call it is a very smart disease. By convincing us to keep it a secret, it makes us disappear. Meanwhile, it doesn't go anywhere. But I want to flip this equation. I want to turn notions of mental illness on their heads. And I want to do that by having us think about location, 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 and where we put things. See, the house where I grew up in was a 4-bedroom, picture-windowed house that wouldn't have looked like a high-level care facility from the outside at all, or from the inside. We had so much love and German-American stoicism in my big baby boom family that as long as my dad could keep feeding us, pulling us out of bed, and turning our station wagon into an ambulance every now and again, we hardly noticed how many of us kept disappearing. And that my mother, if she made it out of the back areas of our house at all, was fairly chained to her swivel rocker in the living room, which was always in front of the picture window. And I, of course, didn't notice my decreasing mobility. As a little girl, I was a dancer, a gymnast, a fellow user of sidewalks, like my dad, not prone to all the shortcuts and less visible routes that many of my 5 older siblings had begun to take already. As I graduated from high school and college and managed to hold on to a relationship with someone who really loved me, and went to graduate school and had 3 warm, loving children, I thought I'd escaped all my mom's corners. If anyone was blind, it was my spouse and my kids. They wanted me to go to the grocery store. How could I do that? Didn't they realize that for me to leave my study, where I kept writing the same book over and over and over, was to risk a fate far worse than an empty refrigerator? You know, the way my mind was working or not working at that time, it was sort of like if I were to appear in the produce aisle or the pasta aisle or, for some reason, especially the frozen pizza aisle, then I might disappear somehow. It didn't make any sense. But fortunately, my husband and my kids weren't fooled by my madness. Even if it took roughly 20 years for them to pull me out of my self-imposed solitary confinement, they never gave up. They stood up to that big, scary monster that wanted to huff and puff and blow our house down. That's what I have to offer, a simple idea that might help you stand up to any big, scary monsters in your midst. What if we all treated our mental health like our dental health? What if we didn't wait for crises and diagnoses, but instead incorporated mental health care into our family wellness plan from day one? Now, I realize that with the Affordable Care Act possibly going away, this could get a little trickier. But what I'm talking about is the idea that what we usually put last on the list, we would move up to first. So that maybe even before picking up the phone to call our favorite general practitioner or our favorite chiropractor or our favorite podiatrist, we might pick up the phone and call our favorite mental health professional. Could this work? Could this possibly allow us to beat the monster at its own game? You know, I can't say, because frankly, I don't know of any research or studies that approach mental health from a proactive place like this. What I can say is that since becoming a family that treats our mental health like our dental health, things have become wonderfully ho-hum around our house. All 5 of us now have our favorite therapists, and some of us have our favorite psychiatrists. Things aren't perfect, but they're less eventful than when all of us kept trying to hide our mental colds and flus. You see, we pretend that we can hide these things, and if we just hold it in, they'll go away somehow. But actually, it's all pretty obvious. Think about a person who is shut down or self-isolating or hurting others for no good reason or pushing away people who love them, and especially when that person needs those other people. Think about that. There's something wrong with that picture. Just as there's something wrong with the picture of a person who has pneumonia, for example, and decides to run a marathon or swim the English Channel. This isn't to say that a lot of mental sniffles and coughs can't go away on their own. But let me remind you of what got me here today. 1, I didn't try to hide my cold. 2, I went straight to bed. 3, my family checked on me and brought me anything I wanted. And I have to say that this strategy has been helping me with my recurring bouts of depression and anxiety and mania too. I've begun to find that just by talking about them the way I would talk about any other ailment seems to help, and in some cases it feels like it almost makes them go away. It's almost like our gray matter just wants a little fresh air, a little light on the subject. For in the immortal words of Julie Andrews, nothing comes from nothing, nothing ever could. So maybe the monster just wants to be seen too, and seen for what it is, as common as the common cold, nothing more, nothing less than a part of life. You see, I grew up in a house where my mom always kept the curtains open. Thanks.